There comes a time in your life when the silence around you starts speaking louder than the people you used to love. A time when your empty room feels more like peace than all the crowded rooms where you once had to fake a smile. And in that moment, you realize maybe being alone isn't loneliness. Maybe it's healing. You see, we were taught to believe that being alone meant something was missing, that love had to come wrapped in another person. But what if the greatest love you will ever know is the one you give to yourself? What if solitude is not your punishment, but your resurrection? Because sometimes the relationship that drains you, the one that makes you question your worth, your strength, your purpose, that's the real loneliness. But waking up alone, free, at peace, knowing you don't have to shrink for anyone just to be accepted, that is divine. So don't let the world rush you into needing someone. Take your time, walk with God, reconnect with your soul, because living alone, if done with intention, can be the most powerful relationship you ever have with yourself. You know, when you spend time alone, truly alone, something inside you starts to shift. It's not immediate and it's not always pretty. At first, the silence can feel deafening. You might even try to fill it with distractions, music, TV, scrolling through your phone, anything to avoid being alone with your thoughts. But eventually, when the noise dies down and it's just you and your reflection, you start to see the parts of yourself you've been running from. You start to sit with your insecurities instead of hiding them behind relationships or fake smiles. And in that sacred space of stillness, you begin to understand something powerful. You are not broken. You are not too much. You are not unlovable. You are simply unfinished. And that is beautiful. There is something so deep that happens when you no longer need someone else to tell you that you matter. When your worth isn't hanging on a text back or someone remembering your birthday or being chosen in a world obsessed with validation. You start looking at yourself in the mirror differently. You start whispering kinder things to your soul. Instead of criticizing every flaw, you begin to admire your strength. You start appreciating the journey that brought you here, the resilience, the quiet battles no one saw, the way you held yourself together when everything was falling apart. You realize you were enough this whole time. You just had to get quiet enough to hear it. When you're constantly around people, you can forget what your own voice sounds like. You start bending, shrinking, adjusting yourself to fit the spaces other people create. You try to be lovable, agreeable, digestible. But solitude doesn't ask you to perform. It doesn't demand anything from you. It just invites you to come as you are. And in that freedom, you meet the real you, the one who cries without shame, the one who dreams boldly, who's not afraid to be misunderstood, the one who knows that their value isn't in what they can do for others, but simply in who they are. You start building a home within yourself. And once you have that, no one can take it from you. There's a certain power in waking up alone, not because you were left, but because you chose peace over chaos. When you make that choice, it stings at first. You question yourself. You remember the warmth of companionship, even if it came with pain. But over time, you start to understand not every warm body brings a warm soul. Not every I love you is rooted in truth. And not every relationship is meant to last. Living alone teaches you how to soothe your own heart, how to cook dinner for yourself and still smile, how to laugh at your own jokes, cry on your own shoulder, and celebrate your own victories, big or small. That's not loneliness, that's a woman. That's a man. That's a soul learning how to love itself. You begin to heal in ways you never could while constantly pouring into someone else's cup. You begin to refill your own. You stop compromising your peace just to keep the peace. You stop apologizing for taking up space. And that's the moment you realize how much love you used to give away to people who didn't know what to do with it. But now you give it to yourself. Gently, consistently, fiercely. You speak life into your own dreams. You affirm your own beauty, your own intelligence, your own growth. You become the love you've been searching for, and suddenly you're not so desperate for someone else to fill that void because you filled it yourself. And it overflows. People will tell you that you're wasting time being alone, that you're too picky, too proud, too closed off. They'll say things like, you just haven't found the right one, but maybe. just maybe, you were meant to find you first. Maybe solitude was never a delay. Maybe it was divine alignment, a sacred pause so you could break cycles, face your wounds, and learn the kind of self-respect that refuses to settle. Maybe the right one can't even find you until you become the version of yourself that knows how to walk away from anything that threatens your peace. And maybe you'll meet someone who adds to your joy, but even if you don't, you'll still be whole. Loving yourself in solitude is not just about bubble baths and self-care Sundays. It's about facing the parts of yourself that still hurt. It's about holding space for your own tears without judgment. It's about setting boundaries even when it's hard. It's about refusing to betray yourself for temporary comfort. That's not easy. That takes courage. But solitude gives you the strength to stop begging for love and start becoming love. You become someone who doesn't need to chase or prove anything. You walk into rooms with your head held high, not because you think you're better, but because you finally know you're enough. And that shift is spiritual. You learn to celebrate your solitude not as a lack, but as a sanctuary, a place where your creativity flows, your intuition sharpens, your voice grows stronger. You pick up old dreams, forgotten hobbies, passions that were buried under years of trying to be who everyone else needed you to be. And you slowly begin to bloom, not for anyone's approval, not for social media, just for you. Just because it feels good to become the version of yourself that feels authentic and free. The one who doesn't flinch at silence anymore, but welcomes it like an old friend. The one who doesn't fear the mirror, but stares into it with pride. You look around one day and realize your peace is priceless. Your solitude is sacred. You're no longer rushing to fill the empty space because it's not empty anymore. It's full of you, your growth, your prayers, your breakthroughs. You're not waiting to be completed. You're already whole. And when someone finally does come along, they won't be your source. They'll just be an addition. Because the love you've built within yourself will be unshakable. You'll love from overflow, not from lack. And you'll never again trade your soul's peace just to say you're not alone. Because you've been alone and you've never been more alive. That's the beauty of solitude. That's the transformation. You don't just sit with yourself, you learn to love yourself. You don't just pass the time, you invest in your future. You don't just endure the quiet, you turn it into your sanctuary. And slowly, steadily, you rise. Not because someone carried you, but because you carried yourself. You lifted yourself from the ashes of broken expectations. You wiped your own tears, straightened your own crown, and chose to keep walking. Alone maybe, but not empty, not lost, just becoming, just evolving, just learning that maybe, just maybe, being alone was never a curse. Maybe it was the most beautiful beginning of all. There comes a day when you wake up and you just can't do it anymore. You can't fake the smile. You can't keep tolerating disrespect disguised as love. You can't keep handing your heart to people who only show up when it's convenient. Something inside you breaks, but it's not the kind of break that shatters you. No, it's the kind of break that finally sets you free. You feel it in your bones. You've given enough chances. You've explained yourself one too many times. You've swallowed your voice for the sake of harmony, but now you want more, not more attention, not more promises. You want more peace, more truth, more you. And that's when you know you've outgrown the lesser version of love you used to settle for. Because when you didn't know your value, you tolerated things you never should have. You let people play small with your soul. You let them take from you, drain you, confuse you, and you called it love. But it wasn't love, it was fear. Fear of being alone, fear of being unwanted, fear of not being chosen. So you shrunk, you accepted half effort. You convinced yourself that maybe a little bit of something was better than a whole lot of nothing. But now you see it clearly. A little bit of something from the wrong person is worse than nothing at all. When you start valuing yourself, you stop chasing people who walk away from you. You stop explaining your worth to those who should have seen it the first time. You stop trying to convince someone to love you the way you deserve. You just stop. Not because you don't care, but because you finally care about yourself more. You walk away from unanswered texts, unreciprocated energy, and mixed signals. You choose clarity over confusion, respect over routine. And you no longer feel guilty for choosing yourself. That's not selfish, that's survival. That's growth. That's honoring the version of you who used to settle just to feel seen. And it's not just relationships. It's friendships, it's jobs, It's environments that once felt comfortable but now feel toxic. You stop showing up in places where your presence is only valued when it's convenient. You stop saying yes when your soul is screaming no. You stop overextending yourself for people who wouldn't stretch a finger for you. Because now you know peace is your new standard. And once you've tasted peace, chaos can't seduce you anymore. Once you've stood in your truth, validation from others loses its grip. You become unapologetically protective of your energy. And that is power. There's a strength that comes with knowing your value. It's quiet, it's steady, it doesn't need to announce itself. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. You just walk differently, you speak differently, you love differently. And when people sense that shift in you, they'll either rise to meet you or fall away. But either way, you're not dimming your light to fit into places that were never built for your brilliance. You know who you are, you know what you bring to the table, and if someone can't see it, that's their blindness, not your deficiency. And yes, it gets lonely sometimes. Growth always costs something. When you stop settling, you lose people. But you find yourself. You find your standards. You find your joy again, the kind that isn't tied to someone else showing up. You start attracting people who reflect your growth, not your wounds. You start creating boundaries, not walls. And the love that once felt like survival now feels like safety. Because when you know your worth, you don't just demand better from others. You give better to yourself. You treat yourself like the masterpiece you are. And you stop handing yourself to people who only know how to admire paintings from afar. You begin to understand that real love, real friendship, real purpose, it doesn't require you to shrink. It doesn't feel like walking on eggshells. It doesn't leave you anxious, second guessing, wondering if you're too much. It feels like home. And anything that doesn't feel like home anymore, you leave it behind. Not with bitterness, not with revenge, just with peace. Because the version of you that knows your value doesn't need to prove a point. You just move on, you just rise, you just grow. And in that growth, you unlock a life that honors your spirit. It's wild how long we can stay stuck in situations that don't serve us, all because we forgot who we were, all because we were waiting for someone to treat us better than we were willing to treat ourselves. But once you start loving yourself the way you always wanted to be loved, everything changes. You become your own protector, your own cheerleader, your own peacekeeper, and you realize you never needed to settle. You just needed to remember who you are, not who they told you to be, not who you pretended to be to fit in, but who you are. When you are fully seen, fully accepted, fully loved by you. And when that shift happens, you become dangerous, not to others, but to your past, to your patterns, to the parts of you that once thought settling was the only option. Now you're building a life that reflects your healing, a life that mirrors your strength, a life that makes room for only what aligns with your highest self. You stop begging, you stop tolerating, you stop playing small, and you rise with a quiet confidence, knowing that anything that doesn't honor your worth isn't meant to stay. You don't settle, you soar. There are moments in life when everything goes quiet, not because the world stops moving, but because your soul is finally tired of the noise, the opinions, the distractions, the constant chase for validation. It all fades. And in that stillness, in that sacred space where no one else can reach you, something divine begins to happen. You start hearing what you were too distracted to hear before. God's voice, that gentle, firm whisper that was always there, buried beneath the chaos. And suddenly, you're not just alive, you're aware. Aware that this moment isn't empty. It's holy. And for the first time in a long time, you feel seen, not by people, but by the one who created you. You begin to realize that solitude isn't punishment, it's preparation. God doesn't isolate you to harm you. He pulls you away to align you, to cleanse your path of noise so you can finally recognize his direction. He removes people not to leave you lonely, but to remove the confusion between you and his voice. You don't need everyone's support when you have God's guidance. And when you sit alone in the silence, it's no longer empty space. It's sacred ground. That's where purpose gets revealed. So many of us have been trying to find our purpose in people, in careers, in relationships, in achievement. But the truth is, your purpose isn't out there, it's in him. And you can't hear his calling when you're constantly chasing things that were never meant to fulfill you. So God removes the noise, the people who only loved a version of you, the distractions that felt good but pulled you further from your path. And it hurts. Oh, it hurts. But healing often comes disguised as heartbreak, because before God gives you the promise, he strips away the poison. Before he launches you, he grounds you. In solitude, your prayers change. They stop being about what you want and start becoming about who he wants you to be. You stop asking for comfort and start asking for character. You stop begging for open doors and start asking for the wisdom to know which ones to walk through. You no longer ask God to remove the pain. You ask him to reveal the purpose in it. And that's when transformation begins. That's when your heart softens and your spirit strengthens. That's when you stop living for the applause and start living for the assignment. The world teaches you to hustle. God teaches you to be still. The world says chase the bag. God says seek the kingdom. And when you finally start listening, when your soul begins to align with his rhythm, everything changes. You stop rushing. You stop panicking. You start trusting. You start flowing. Because once God becomes your source, no person can be your crutch. And when your identity is rooted in him, rejection doesn't shake you. Loneliness doesn't break you. And silence doesn't scare you. Because now you understand this stillness isn't absence. It's intimacy. And from that intimacy, clarity is born. You begin to see your life through God's eyes. You stop envying others because you realize what's for them is not for you. You stop forcing doors because you trust that what's meant for you won't miss you. You stop performing, pretending, proving because you know you are loved just as you are. Not by man, but by the Maker. And that love becomes your anchor. It becomes the fire that fuels your purpose, the compass that guides your decisions, and the peace that surpasses all understanding. In that solitude, you stop asking why me and start declaring use me. You stop fearing failure and start walking in faith. You realize that your story, every scar, every tear, every setback, it wasn't wasted. It was preparation. God was molding you in the wilderness, teaching you in the silence, strengthening you through every no, every delay, every disappointment. And when the time comes, when you step into the fullness of your purpose, you won't owe anyone credit but him, because it was in the solitude that you became who you were always meant to be. There's a reason the most powerful voices were forged in isolation. There's a reason Jesus himself withdrew to lonely places to pray. Purpose doesn't grow in popularity, it grows in private. And if you're in a season where God has pulled you back, stripped things away, silenced the noise, it's not rejection, it's refinement. He's preparing you to carry something greater, to speak from a place of purity, to walk with authority, not arrogance. And every lonely night, every unanswered prayer, every tear cried in the dark, it's not unseen. Heaven is watching, and your purpose is unfolding. So don't rush the process. Don't resent the silence. Don't numb the solitude with empty company. Sit with it. Let God speak to the parts of you that no one else knows. Let him rebuild what the world tried to break. Let him remind you who you are in him, because once you know that, once you're anchored in that divine identity, no storm can shake you, no person can define you, and no lie can stop you. You're no longer just existing, you're living. Living with purpose, living with power, living with peace that only God can give. And that peace, that purpose, that presence of God that you found in your solitude, that's the most powerful gift you'll ever receive. It's not about being alone. It's about becoming aligned with God, with truth, with your divine assignment. That's not loneliness. That's legacy. That's what sets you apart. And once you taste that kind of connection, you'll never go back to living for surface level approval. You'll rise. You'll walk different. You'll love deeper. Because now you know when you're connected to God, you are never alone. There comes a time when you get tired of feeling like you need somebody just to breathe. You wake up one day and realize your peace should never depend on someone else's presence. And in that awakening, something shifts, something sacred. You begin to unlearn the lies you believed about love, about validation, about needing to be completed by another. You begin to feel the weight of all those emotional crutches you leaned on for far too long. And then you put them down. Not in bitterness, not in anger, but in truth. Because when you finally learn to sit with yourself without distraction, without outside reassurance, you discover a strength that doesn't shake, a peace that doesn't panic, a calm that no storm can touch. Emotional independence isn't about building walls. It's about building roots. Roots that grow deep into self-awareness, into stability, into the kind of inner strength that doesn't need to beg for love, chase attention, or fear being alone. You begin to make space for your feelings, every tear, every doubt, every ache, and instead of outsourcing them to others, you start holding them with grace. You stop saying I'm fine just to avoid rejection. You stop suppressing your needs just to keep people around. You give yourself the permission to feel fully and still stand strong. That is not weakness. That is power. That is clarity. You used to give people too much power over your emotions. One word could ruin your whole day. One unanswered text could spiral you into self-doubt. But now, you breathe. You pause. You respond instead of reacting. That's growth. That's you no longer handing out the remote control to your emotions. You realize that your peace is your responsibility. You take it back from the hands you placed it in. And the beautiful part? You begin to trust yourself again. You stop doubting your instincts. You stop needing constant reassurance. You start feeling at home in your own soul. The more time you spend in solitude, the more clearly you see who you are, not who the world wants you to be, not who your past painted you as, but who you truly are beneath it all. And with that clarity comes power, the power to walk away from what doesn't serve you, the power to say no without guilt, the power to say yes to yourself. You're no longer trying to impress people who wouldn't recognize your worth even if you screamed it. You're no longer shrinking to be accepted. You're standing tall, even if you stand alone. You stop waiting for someone else to save you, fix you, or love you enough to heal what's broken, because now you're doing the work. You're showing up for yourself. You're learning to sit with your pain instead of escaping it. You're learning to enjoy your own company without needing constant distractions. That's when the healing becomes real, not surface healing, soul healing, the kind that transforms how you talk to yourself, how you treat yourself, how you protect your peace, the kind of healing that sets the tone for every relationship that comes after. You begin to love yourself not in a loud, boastful way, but in a quiet, sacred way. A way that says, I know my value. I don't need to prove it to anyone. And when that love settles into your bones, your clarity sharpens. You stop confusing chemistry for compatibility. You stop labeling trauma bonds as soulmates. You stop settling for connection that feels like home, just because home used to hurt. Because now, you're emotionally clear. You know that peace isn't found in chaos. Love isn't proven through pain. And your worth isn't defined by someone staying. Emotional independence frees you. It frees you from needing closure from people who were never capable of giving it. It frees you from tying your identity to how someone else sees you. It frees you from replaying the past, trying to rewrite what wasn't yours to fix. You don't need to carry their baggage anymore. You don't need to apologize for growing. You're not too much. You're not too sensitive. You're just finally listening to the parts of you that got silenced while you were trying to be lovable. And those parts, they carry your truth, your power, your purpose. You learn that clarity isn't always comfortable. It often comes with goodbyes. It comes with endings, with recognizing what's real and what was never meant to last. But even through the grief, the letting go, the discomfort, you remain grounded. Because now you know your peace is not negotiable. Your energy is precious. And your heart is no longer for rent to people who don't know how to handle it. That's the kind of clarity that solitude births. It hurts at first, but it sets you free. You'll begin to see relationships differently too. You're no longer looking for someone to fill a void. You're not desperate to be chosen. You choose you first. And that shifts everything. You show up whole. And when you do connect with someone, it's not from a place of lack, it's from abundance. It's not to complete you, it's to complement you. That's when love becomes healthy. When it's no longer survival, when it's not built on fear of being alone, but instead it's built on truth, mutual respect, shared growth. That kind of love only enters your life when you've built it within yourself first. So now you walk with a different kind of confidence. Quiet, solid, unshaken. You're not chasing anything or anyone. You're not proving your worth to people who couldn't see it before. You're not settling just to say you have someone. You're full, whole, emotionally clear. And you've learned through the silence and the solitude that the most powerful relationship you'll ever have is the one you build with yourself. Everything else is a bonus, not a necessity. There's a moment in life when your soul just gets tired. Not your body, not your mind, your soul, tired of patterns, tired of pretending, tired of showing up for people who never show up for you. And in that sacred exhaustion, something divine happens. You pause, you get still. And for the first time in a long time, you ask yourself, why do I keep ending up in the same pain wearing a different face? That question doesn't come from weakness. It comes from wisdom, from growth. Because now you're ready to break free, to stop repeating what broke you. And that journey begins when you finally choose solitude over cycles. When you're surrounded by noise, by people, by distractions, by chaos. You can't hear the patterns. But when you step back, when you isolate in peace instead of drowning in dysfunction, the truth gets loud. You see how your need for love blinded you to disrespect. You see how your fear of being alone kept you tied to what was slowly destroying you. And suddenly the excuses fall apart. The clarity kicks in. You realize that every toxic cycle you stayed in was feeding on your silence, your denial, your hope that they'd change. But now, you're the one changing. It's hard at first. Because toxicity doesn't always come in loud explosions. Sometimes it whispers sweet promises. Sometimes it looks like comfort, like routine, like home. But it's not love if it costs you your peace. It's not loyalty if it breaks your spirit. And it's not your job to fix what's constantly wounding you. You weren't created to survive on emotional scraps. You weren't designed to play small just to be accepted. And when you finally break away, you start to see how long you've been starving for something real, real peace, real love, real healing. Solitude gives you that mirror. It gives you space to unlearn. You stop romanticizing struggle. You stop glorifying survival mode. You stop craving what hurt you just because it's familiar. And you start choosing different, not because it's easy, but because you finally know your worth. You start recognizing that love should feel safe, respectful, nurturing, not like you're walking on eggshells or waiting for the next emotional blow. Breaking free means no longer apologizing for wanting peace. It means no longer settling for patterns that your younger self accepted because they didn't know better. But you know better now. Freedom from toxic cycles isn't just physical, it's emotional, it's spiritual. It's when you stop repeating the same arguments in your head. When you stop trying to explain your value to people committed to misunderstanding you. When you stop blaming yourself for their inability to love right. That's when the chains fall. You stop running back to what you had to crawl away from. You stop calling chaos passion. You stop seeing red flags as challenges. Because clarity has entered the room, and with it comes a powerful stillness that says, not any. You begin to grieve the old version of you, the one who tolerated too much, who stayed too long, who gave too many chances. But grief isn't weakness. It's the beginning of rebirth. Every tear you shed is a layer of the past falling off. Every lonely night becomes a seed of strength, and little by little, you rebuild, you reconstruct your boundaries, you rewire your patterns. You reintroduce yourself to the version of you that isn't addicted to pain. And that version is whole. That version is free. You start choosing differently. Your spirit is no longer impressed by surface level charm or temporary affection. You look deeper now. You listen to energy, not just words. You pay attention to how you feel around someone, not just how much they say they love you. You're no longer seduced by potential. You want consistency, integrity, safety. That's what healing teaches you. That's what breaking cycles gives you. The gift of discernment. You no longer fall for the same tricks dressed in new clothes. You've lived the lesson. Now you know the signs. And here's the real beauty. You don't hate the people who hurt you, you just outgrow them. You bless them and release them. You stop waiting for apologies. You stop needing closure because your peace has become more important than your pride. You realize you don't need revenge, you need healing. You don't need to prove anything, you just need to walk away with your soul intact. And that shift, that's liberation. That's maturity. That's when you know the cycle ends with you. You become the cycle breaker. The one who chooses to feel the pain rather than pass it on. The one who rewrites the story. The one who chooses solitude over dysfunction, healing over habit, peace over patterns. And that doesn't make you cold, it makes you wise. It means you finally had enough of the repetition, the emotional games, the temporary highs that lead to permanent scars. Now you're walking a new path. And yes, it's lonely sometimes, but it's also sacred because it's honest. And healing never happens in the noise. It happens in the quiet. You realize you're no longer who you used to be. You're not desperate. You're not chasing. You're not ignoring your intuition just to keep someone in your life. You're grounded now, rooted, whole. And the moment you broke free from that toxic cycle, the moment you chose your healing over your history, that's the moment your soul started breathing again. That's when you stopped surviving and started living. There comes a time in your life when the mask gets heavy, the one you've been wearing to fit in, to keep the peace, to be accepted. You smile when your spirit is aching. You shrink so others can feel tall. You say yes when everything in you is screaming no. And one day it all becomes too much, not because you're weak, but because your soul starts whispering, "This isn't me." That whisper turns into a roar, and you realize it's time to find the real you, the one that's been buried under expectation, survival, people-pleasing, and fear. You start searching, not out there, but within. Because your authentic self was never lost, just waiting. Solitude gives you that gift. It strips away the noise, the opinions, the pressures, the distractions, and it forces you to meet yourself without filters. At first, it's uncomfortable. You don't know what to do with the silence. You don't know how to sit with the parts of you you've been taught to hide. But slowly something sacred begins. You stop performing. You stop pretending. You stop chasing validation. And for the first time in maybe your whole life, you start being, not being what others want, just being who you are. You begin to remember what makes you come alive, what stirs your soul, what makes you laugh from your gut and cry with purpose. You reconnect with your voice, the one you silenced for years just to be loved. And you begin to trust it again. You speak up for yourself. You set boundaries, not out of anger, but out of love. You honor your energy. You protect your peace. And as you do, you realize authenticity isn't about perfection. It's about alignment. It's about living in a way that reflects the truth of your soul. The authentic you doesn't need approval to feel worthy. They don't need attention to feel seen. They don't change depending on who's in the room. That version of you is consistent, grounded, centered. And once you discover them, you can't go back. You can't unsee the truth. You can't rejoin what you've outgrown. The roles you used to play feel suffocating. The relationships built on pretense begin to dissolve. Not because you're bitter, but because you're better. Better at knowing what fits your spirit, what feeds your growth, and what aligns with your purpose. And in that discovery, you begin to glow different. You're no longer chasing light, you are the light. You don't need to fit in because you were never meant to blend in. You were born to stand out, to lead, to walk your own path, even if it's lonely, even if it's misunderstood. Because now you're not looking for a place to belong. You are your home. And that's what authenticity gives you, the ability to walk into every room fully yourself. No apology, no facade, just truth. It's not about being loud or bold all the time. It's about being real. It's when you can say, "This is who I am." And if it's too much for some, that's okay. I wasn't made for everyone. I was made for purpose. That shift is powerful. You stop needing to convince people of your worth. You stop trying to fit relationships that require you to shrink. You love yourself enough to say, "If I have to lose myself to keep you, then I'm not interested in staying." That's what happens when you discover your real self. Your standards rise and your soul breathes. You begin to dress, speak, move, and live in ways that reflect your inner truth. You follow what feels aligned, not just what looks right on paper. And it's scary sometimes because the world rewards conformity, but your reward is deeper. It's internal peace. It's waking up without the weight of pretending. It's looking in the mirror and seeing someone you respect, someone you love, someone who's whole with or without applause. And that version of you is unstoppable because they're rooted. They're not moved by trends, drama, or manipulation. They are anchored in self-respect. People will notice the change. Some will celebrate you, others will resist it because your authenticity will make their comfort with the fake feel exposed. Let them. You weren't reborn to make everyone comfortable. You were reborn to be real, to walk in purpose, to use your voice, to heal generations by simply being who you were always meant to be. And even if that costs you connections, it's worth it, because now you're connected to something deeper, your calling, your truth, your God-given identity. And here's the most beautiful part. When you live in truth, you start attracting people who see and honor the real you. Not the masked version, not the diluted version, but the raw, pure, powerful soul you've become. People who match your energy, who don't ask you to dim your light to make them feel okay. That's when your relationships become sacred, not perfect, but real. Because now you're no longer loving from a place of fear. You're loving from a place of wholeness. And that love, it's life-changing. So when you find yourself walking alone, growing quietly, feeling the old parts of you fall away, don't rush back into the noise. Sit with it. Feel it. Because something sacred is happening. You're not losing yourself. You're finally meeting who you've always been. And that discovery, that's the beginning of everything. There comes a moment in your journey when you look around at your life, the choices you've made, the path you've walked, and it hits you. So much of it wasn't built by your truth, but by the weight of what others expected from you. You did what they said would make you happy. You followed the rules, checked the boxes, played it safe, smiled when it hurt, stayed quiet when you wanted to scream. And somewhere along the way, you started drifting from yourself. You forgot what made you feel alive. But then life breaks you in just the right way. It brings you to your knees, not to destroy you, but to wake you up, to show you that you were never meant to live on borrowed dreams. You were meant to live by truth. And that truth, it's raw, unfiltered, and buried under years of noise. But when you start clearing space for it, when you start listening to that inner voice again, your entire world begins to shift. You stop moving just to be accepted. You start pausing to ask, is this what I want or what I've been told I should want? That single question cracks open a whole new way of living. You begin realizing how many of your dreams were inherited, how many of your choices were driven by fear, and how many of your beliefs were planted by someone else's pain. So you start letting go, not out of rebellion, but out of freedom. You stop chasing what doesn't feel right anymore. You begin to rebuild your life from the inside out. Not to impress, not to prove anything, but to feel aligned, to wake up with a quiet joy that says, this is who I am, and this is the life I choose. That's when you begin walking in purpose. You don't need a crowd to clap for you. You don't need validation to move forward. You become your own compass. You start saying no to the things that drain you and yes to the things that feed your soul. And the more you honor your truth, the more peace you find, not because life becomes easier, but because you're no longer at war with yourself. Creating a life based on truth is uncomfortable at first. You'll disappoint people. You'll lose some connections. You'll be called selfish, difficult, or crazy. But those are just labels people use when you stop living by their script. And as hard as it is, you realize something powerful. It's not your job to shrink for others. It's not your role to carry dreams that don't belong to you. And it's not your calling to live for applause. Your truth may not be loud, but it is sacred. It's not about fame. It's about fulfillment. And that fulfillment only comes when you choose authenticity over approval. You begin to notice a difference in the way you move. You're slower to say yes. You're quicker to walk away. You don't stay where your spirit feels small. You don't compromise your values to keep peace. And you start trusting that what's meant for you won't require you to betray yourself. That kind of trust is unshakable. It's the foundation of freedom. Because when you're aligned with your truth, your steps are steady. Your decisions are rooted. Your path, even if unclear, is real. And being real will always lead you further than being liked ever could. You learn to give yourself permission to dream differently, to change your mind, to choose a simpler life or a bolder one, whatever feels true. You stop measuring success by what it looks like and start measuring it by how it feels. You start asking deeper questions. Does this align with my values? Does this bring me joy? Does this help me grow? You stop performing. You start creating. You start designing a life that doesn't just look good on the outside, but feels right on the inside. That's when you feel alive, not just existing, not just surviving, but living. And with that life, new opportunities begin to flow in, not because you're chasing them, but because you've made space for them. The right people, the right ideas, the right moments begin to align, not by force, but by frequency. Your energy shifts, your confidence grows. You start attracting what matches your truth, not your mask. And it feels different, lighter, richer, more meaningful. You don't have to fake it anymore. You don't have to hide your scars. You show up whole, honest human, and in doing so, you invite others to do the same. You stop needing a crowd to confirm your direction. Your soul becomes your guide, and the more you listen to it, the clearer your vision becomes. You stop clinging to plans that no longer serve you. You stop being afraid to pivot. You realize that life isn't about sticking to a script. It's about staying true to your evolution. Because who you are is not a final version, it's a becoming, a constant unfolding. And when you live in truth, you give yourself permission to evolve freely, to rise as needed, to change course without shame. Eventually, you look back at the old life, the one built on expectations, and you feel gratitude, not because it was right, but because it showed you what wasn't. And sometimes that's the most powerful lesson. Realizing what no longer fits so you can start creating what truly does. You no longer regret the time spent trying to be who others wanted, because that version of you was surviving. But now, you're thriving. Now you're choosing. Now you're aligned. And there is nothing more powerful than a soul living its truth in a world addicted to pretending. So you keep building, brick by brick, breath by breath, not rushing, not comparing, just being faithful to your inner compass. You honor your voice. You trust your pace. You protect your peace. And slowly, steadily, beautifully, you create a life that feels like home to your soul. Not everyone will understand it. Not everyone will walk with you, but that's okay, because this life, this path, this truth, it was never meant for everyone. It was meant for you. And now you finally have the courage to live it. The moment you start living in alignment with your true purpose, the universe begins to respond. It's as if you've tuned into a frequency that resonates with the opportunities, people, and experiences that were always meant for you. Before, you might have felt like you were just drifting, stumbling upon random encounters and coincidences. But when you commit to living authentically, something shifts. The people who enter your life no longer feel like accidents. They are exactly who you need at this moment of your journey. The experiences that come your way no longer feel like random events. They are aligned with the path you're supposed to be on. It's not magic, it's energy. When you show up as your true self, you signal to the world around you that you are ready to receive what's meant for you. What you start to notice is that the people who align with your purpose show up at the most serendipitous times. These individuals may seem ordinary, but there's something extraordinary about their presence. They don't need to impress you. They simply fit into your life in ways you never expected. They challenge you, inspire you, and encourage you to keep going when things get tough. These are not just acquaintances. They're connections that resonate with your deepest values and vision. You'll notice how their energy matches yours, how their ambitions align with yours, and how their dreams are a reflection of your own. These are the people who will help you grow, push you forward, and make you realize that you are never alone in your pursuit. In the same vein, the opportunities that begin to unfold in front of you feel like they were always there, waiting for the right moment. At first, it might feel a little surreal. You might ask yourself, how did I get here? But it's not by accident. These opportunities are born out of your energy, your intentions, and your newfound commitment to your truth. The job you've always wanted might appear, not because you've worked harder than everyone else, but because you finally learned to honor your worth. The business venture you've dreamed of starting might show up, not because of sheer luck, but because you've been putting your soul into everything you do, and it's attracting the right circumstances. Opportunities come when you're aligned because you're no longer chasing after them in desperation. You're allowing them to find you. The beauty of this shift is that it's not about forcing things into existence. It's about allowing things to come to you. And as you make space for your true purpose, your whole perspective changes. You begin to trust that what's meant for you will come and what's not meant for you will leave. You're no longer clinging to outdated dreams, projects, or relationships just for the sake of having them. The more you live in alignment with your authentic self, the less you feel the need to prove yourself. You stop pushing for things that don't align, and you stop chasing things that drain you. And in that space, the right opportunities show up, almost as if by divine timing. They don't feel forced. They feel earned in the deepest sense. As you live more authentically, you start to understand the importance of timing. Opportunities don't arrive in the way you always expect. Sometimes they come as quiet whispers, and sometimes they come as loud, undeniable calls. When you're aligned, you begin to discern the difference between the right opportunities and the distractions that used to pull you off course. You no longer waste time trying to force something that doesn't feel right. Instead, you embrace the flow. You trust the timing of life. You trust that what is meant for you will arrive in its own time, and your job is to keep showing up, staying true to your path, and preparing yourself to step into those opportunities when they do come. The people you meet along the way start to feel like divine connections, whether they're mentors, friends, collaborators, or strangers who cross your path at just the right moment. These are the people who understand your vision, who support your mission, and who encourage you to keep pushing forward when you want to give up. They understand the struggles because they've walked similar paths, and they're here to help you find your way. They believe in you when you're too afraid to believe in yourself. And you start to realize that these relationships aren't just coincidences. They're the result of you living in alignment with your soul's purpose. The right people show up because you're finally open to receiving them. This also applies to the experiences that enter your life. When you begin living with purpose, you stop accepting things that feel meaningless or unfulfilling. Every experience that comes your way feels like it carries a lesson, a gift, or an opportunity for growth. Even the challenges you face start to feel like part of a greater design, a step along the path you're meant to walk. You no longer dread the obstacles because you know they're not in your way. They are part of your way. Every setback becomes a setup for something better. The experiences you have are no longer random or disappointing. They're purposeful. They mold you, refine you, and strengthen your resolve to keep walking forward. Living in alignment with your true purpose also means you begin to feel a deeper sense of gratitude. The more you show up authentically, the more you begin to appreciate the small moments that others might overlook, the conversations that bring you clarity, the quiet moments that restore your soul, the people who support you in ways you never expected, the opportunities that arise when you least expect them. As you focus on living in alignment with your purpose, you become more aware of these gifts. You don't take them for granted because you understand that everything you experience is a reflection of the energy you're putting into the world. And when you embrace that energy, you attract more of what aligns with your highest self. The more you stay true to your purpose, the more you realize that nothing in life is ever wasted. The opportunities that show up may not always be what you imagine, but they will always lead you to what's meant for you. You stop questioning your journey because you know that every step, whether easy or challenging, is part of your growth. And as you continue to evolve, the people you meet, the experiences you have, and the opportunities that arise will align with your purpose in ways you never could have anticipated. The more you honor your authentic self, the more you realize that everything you've been through was preparing you for this moment. This life, your purpose, is unfolding just as it should. And as you live in this alignment, you begin to see the magic in everything. You no longer feel like you have to force things. You trust that the right opportunities, people, and experiences will find you. And when they do, you don't doubt them. You embrace them with open arms, knowing that you've earned your place in this flow. The right opportunities don't feel like a coincidence. They feel like a confirmation of everything you've worked for, everything you've believed in, and everything you've become. And that is the beauty of living in alignment with your true purpose. When you show up authentically, the universe doesn't just respond, it begins to move mountains for you. When you step back from the noise of the world, from the weight of expectations, from the clamor of relationships that left you drained and disconnected, you begin to see the truth. You were never meant to lose yourself just to be loved. You were never meant to water down your spirit just to be accepted. Living alone isn't about isolation. It's about transformation. It's about rediscovering your power, reclaiming your peace, and realigning with your purpose. It's about going inward so you can finally step outward as your true, unshakable self. In solitude, you uncover treasures you didn't even know you had. You start to fall in love with yourself, not in a shallow way, but in a deep, soul-rooted kind of love. The kind that says, I am enough exactly as I am. You stop settling for crumbs because you come to recognize the feast that lives within you. You no longer tolerate disrespect, confusion, or emotional poverty. You see clearly now. Because time alone has sharpened your vision. You no longer mistake drama for connection or chaos for chemistry. You have tasted peace, and nothing less will satisfy your soul. Your relationship with God deepens in silence. You hear him in ways you never could when you were surrounded by distractions. Your purpose begins to unfold in front of you like a divine map. You start walking with more intention, more grace, more power. You realize now that being alone wasn't a punishment, it was a promotion. A sacred space that allowed you to reconnect with the one who created you and the reason you were placed on this earth in the first place. And through it all, you've learned to stand emotionally independent. You're not waiting for someone to save you. You've already rescued yourself. You've built your strength in quiet moments. You've developed clarity in stillness. You now move with wisdom because the fog of dependency has lifted. You are not fragile. You are focused. You are not empty. You are evolving. You don't just react anymore. You respond with purpose because you've trained your heart to be steady even when life is not. You've also broken those toxic cycles, the ones that kept repeating in different forms with different faces, but the same empty endings. You finally stopped dancing to the tune of dysfunction. You saw the pattern and you decided to be the one who ends it. That took courage, that took vision, that took solitude. Because healing doesn't happen in chaos. It happens in quiet. It happens when you pause long enough to confront your truth and choose something better. And now look at you. You've discovered someone you've been searching for your entire life. You, the real you, the whole you, the unapologetic you, the one who isn't trying to please everyone, the one who knows their worth. The one who walks with God and lets that connection guide every step. You've let go of the lies you once believed about yourself. And in return, you've embraced a freedom that only truth can bring. You see, living alone was never about escaping the world. It was about entering your world. And now that you've done that, you're not the same. You don't walk like you used to. You don't think like you used to. You don't need like you used to. You become your own best friend, your own advocate, your own safe place. And that right there, that is power. That is peace. That is purpose. So if you ever find yourself wondering why the path got quiet, if you find yourself missing noise that once felt like love, remember this. Sometimes God clears the room so you can hear you, so you can find you. Because the real you was never meant to be hidden behind roles, titles, or relationships. You were always meant to shine. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. May you walk forward in your truth, in your peace, and in your purpose. Keep growing, keep rising, keep walking, even if it's alone, because sometimes alone is exactly where you find your wings. God bless you. Stay strong, stay true, stay you.